Well, let me just start with a brief on who I am. I've lived in Dan Dykwel. I've lived in Palo Alto for 18 years and have been very involved in the community since the day we moved here. We came here for the schools, the tree-lined streets, the sense of community, and we want to retain that. I have really been involved in three main areas in town: the schools, civic engagement or the community, and business. So on the schools, I was PTA president at Palo Alto High School and have served on the PTA Council. I just finished 2 years as president of that and did receive the Golden Oak Award, which is a state level award for service. And I'm still on it as director of communications. As far as civic engagement, I serve on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I was on the Palo Alto Recreation Foundation Board. I served on the Blue Ribbon Task Force for the Public Safety Building, which was a really terrific experience. In business, I've spent 20 years in marketing, communications, and various marketing positions, management positions in Silicon Valley. I am a local businessman, selling residential real estate, but also doing marketing communications consulting. As a realtor, I understand the value of land. I understand how it contributes to, or how our schools contribute to the value of that land, and creates the type of community that people really desire. Clearly, the budget is the biggest issue on people's minds right now because we have a deficit, and projections are that it's going to take a while to correct that. And it's really a structural issue that's been developing for some time. So my concern is that we haven't addressed it quickly enough, perhaps not aggressively enough, and I want to bring a fresh approach to that. The other big concern of mine is that we really, because we rely so heavily on businesses in this town, they provide about 20% of the tax revenue to the city. Now it's down to about 16%. We need to do a much better job of making it easier to do business in Palo Alto and doing things that will help businesses stay here. That's one discipline. The other side of it is, what do you do to sell Palo Alto, to get revenue generating businesses to come to Palo Alto? So I want to work on that. The other thing that just drives me crazy is the streets and the sidewalks, and infrastructure is not a particularly engaging word for the population, but you hear people talk about it all the time. I have to decide which bicycle to ride depending on where I'm going, because some streets are so much worse than others that you're not sure if you're going to make it with your road bike. So the fact that we're approaching a $450 million backlog is, to me, problematic. It means we haven't been addressing the issue. Funds are extremely hard to come by, but if you don't have a better strategic plan, you're never going to solve the problem. I've always done marketing communications and consulting. I've had clients like Cisco and Apple, but I've assisted my wife in the residential real estate business for 18 years or so, and I am a broker. Right. And I think the problem in 07, if you want to call it a problem, was that the ABAG numbers had just come out and people were really nervous. They falsely associate realtors with development, and that's not what we do. We sell existing homes in Palo Alto. We help people achieve their dreams for their families, and we really understand that the value of the home is based on the quality of life, and you have to protect that quality of life. I mean, that's what people buy. And the schools, they're here for the schools. Clearly, I'm not a close the gate type of person. Some growth is inevitable. If we want our kids to be able to come back and live here, we have to hopefully provide for that. We have the comprehensive plan that helps guide us on where it should be, but it's flexible enough to accommodate things like PCs, and I think we just have to acknowledge that, one, there is going to be some natural growth. That means you just have to approach it very, very carefully. People talk about density housing and they don't like density housing, and they may cite Ricky's Hyatt or some of the developments in the South. Part of the problem is, even though we have architectural review, we have Planning and Transportation Commission review, this is private enterprise, and developers will design and put up something that they think they'll be able to market it, and yet they still pass it through the filters of Palo Alto. So the city is looking at that and is allowing them to do what they can in the context of free enterprise. So I'm not saying build everything along El Camino, because then everybody will get on the bus. That's not realistic. People have to want to live where you put the housing. Start with Alma Plaza, because I drive by it constantly and just am appalled that 15, 18 years later we're still trying to put something on that land, regardless of the motives of the developer, etc. That is one of those situations where the PC allowed it to, I think, languish this way because the community was saying they want neighborhood retail. When I was following it, I was listening to people who were saying, but retail is not going to be viable in that area for whatever number of reasons. And not all retail is viable in all locations. And so you look at the owner of the property and what he's trying to do with it, and you look at the pressures from the community and try and decide, well, what really makes sense here? If you force them to put retail in there, one, since they own the land, they may say, forget it, I'll just leave it fallow. You could end up with another center that just decays because it can't survive. So I think it's really difficult. But the problem with PC is that it looks like there's always going to be, frequently there's pressure for a housing component in that. So you know right off the bat they're going to try and do some housing, the developer. Yeah. Although not the case with JJ&F being office and a little bit of retail. The value of the PC is to provide some flexibility to manage that. If it's not working, and in that case clearly it's not working, then the council may have to look at the comp plan and say, maybe we need to put some additional safeguards in here so that we realize the vision of neighborhood services and commercial districts. Because you're right, the way it's written now, they can take advantage of it, they can game it to get what they're trying to get to. If you're talking about long-term change, then you're probably the least painful way would be to do a tiered system. You have to lead, you have to take a position and say, this is what we can do in our community. I can't believe these other communities are not going to face, if they don't already face, the same situation. Now they may be delaying it, or they may have some magic revenue streams that we haven't discovered, but the reality is things are going to change. You look in the private workforce, the move towards contract labor is huge and continues unabated. I was on the task force established a year ago, September, to oppose measure. I just came to the conclusion that there was more benefit to it than cost. It did not appear to be onerous. Most of the businesses will pay less than $200 annually for it. That is, to me, a small cost, additional cost of doing business. We had very little engagement from the very large corporations. They just didn't come to the meetings. I don't know what that says. I would assume that means they're not concerned, or they consider it a cost of doing business as they're paying in other communities, and so it wasn't an issue for them. If there's a way to tunnel it, that would be great. Everyone's saying, or too many people are saying, oh, it's prohibitively expensive. Well, we don't know that yet. I mean, it's not going to be cheap to build it on the current right-of-way because you have to have trains running while you're building it. So it's going to be expensive to do basically two developments at the same time. So I'm not sure that those numbers necessarily are as far apart as people might think.